Throughout NASCAR history, there's been thousands of sponsors that have graced cars, races, and NASCAR itself. Actually, this year, there are probably thousands of sponsors. If you combine the top 3 nationally touring series, ARCA, any other series you can think of, and there's bound to be sponsors that were in or around NASCAR in this time that don't exist anymore. So today, we're going to look at 7 NASCAR sponsors that don't exist anymore. Starting out, we'll look at one of the most recognizable car-driver sponsor combos in the history of NASCAR with GM Goodwrench. I would say that the black number 3 that Dale Earnhardt drove for so long and really became most known for across America as the Intimidator 4 is probably the most recognizable and famous NASCAR paint scheme in history. And the thing is, Earnhardt drove this car since the late 80s up to his death in 2001, and then it was carried on by Kevin Harvick in different schemes from 2001 all the way to 2006. And in this time, honestly, Earnhardt and Goodwrench especially were a good fit. A blue-collar man who made his way up to the top ranks of one of the most popular sports in America is a great success story, and having that kind of Mr. Goodwrench charm added to it just fit perfectly. It didn't really fit as much with Harvick, but at least the schemes look cool. The name was created in 1977 as a program that was for car service and repair that GM had, led by the kind of mascot mechanic of Mr. Goodwrench. But over time, the program started to run into snags and just didn't have the reach it used to have. So in 2011, nearly 10 years after Dale Earnhardt's passing, it was discontinued and rebranded. Next is Sprint Nexel. Sprint and Nexel were the title sponsors of NASCAR from 2004 to 2016, with Sprint absorbing Nexel in 2005, and then after 2007 becoming the main series sponsor. And this really had its own era. Many remember the branding at the time, and this really was responsible for rebranding NASCAR in color alone from red and white to yellow and black. And we see this even today with the yellow banners and different yellow insignias for the NASCAR playoff drivers. That started during the Sprint era. And the NASCAR Nextel Cup Series is probably just as famous for a lot of fans. It really ushered in the new era with the Nextel Cup and the Chase. And with it, then the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series did the same thing. But the company at large just failed to adapt over time, and they had to drop the title sponsorship in 2016 into 17. Now, part of it was because the company was failing, and part of it also was because NASCAR was just rebranding the way that they did business. The final blow really came when T-Mobile acquired Sprint in April of 2020, and by August of the same year, had basically discontinued everything having to do with the Sprint branding. Third up is Radio Shack, and this was one of the former sponsors to the Spring Texas race, which used to be called the Samsung Radio Shack 500. This company was founded all the way back in 1921 in Boston, Massachusetts, and really became one of the top sellers and honestly one of the pioneers of electronic sales in America. Even into the 2000s, they still had a pretty good reputation to them. But what really killed Radio Shack was the rapid increase of technology with electronics and communications from the 2000s into the 2010s. They had to drop their sponsorship of the Spring Texas race all the way back in 2006 because of some of these issues. And over the next decade, between poor working conditions, bad locations, and bad product planning, as well as poor financial decisions, the ride downhill just continued to accelerate. And before they filed for bankruptcy in 2015, they had 11 straight quarters of being in the red. While the name has been obtained by others and used online, it's not the same store and it's effectively gone. Next up is Kmart. Now, Kmart wasn't as famous of a sponsor, and it wasn't really on as many big cars or a series, but it was on different cars over time in NASCAR, and it even sponsored the Spring Michigan race from 1999 to 2001. And while there are still 2 left in America at the moment, it's fully expected they're going to close any day now, so it virtually doesn't exist at this point. It was a retail giant up until the 2000s, but technology-wise it became incredibly inadequate and dated, and basically became the trashy version of Target. Add to that the fact that there was really better options all over the place and they never adapted, and you had the perfect storm for them to completely nosedive. I actually did used to go to Kmart a lot, especially even in the late 2010s up in Boston, Wisconsin, where I used to camp with my family. Actually, there's a live stream that's online of me in a Kmart parking lot.
In the middle of Wisconsin.
Literally, the girl who works at Kmart is out front taking pictures and video right now of this rolling in. Like
Kmart still exists.
Yes. See,
I'm just waiting to see a tornado.
Now, one that may surprise people is Toys R Us. Yes, Toys R Us sponsored a car in NASCAR, the number 54 for Kevin Grubb in 2002. And Toys R Us at one time was the biggest distributor of toys for children in the world, controlling a quarter of the market at one point. But the biggest killer for this company over time was in 2005 when a group of private equity firms bought out the store and proceeded to run it into the ground in a changing market. It was clear that children were going from playing with action figures, dolls, and different toys to primarily going more to video games and more stuff online. By 2018, they had closed all of its 800 remaining locations after filing for bankruptcy of the previous year. At the time, the company owed over $5 billion in debt. Now, Blockbuster is another that people probably don't remember as sponsoring a car in NASCAR, but they did just that in the Daytona 500 in 2013 with Josh Wise. Blockbuster was the name of the game for video rentals and DVD rentals. And in the 90s and 2000s, it was a fun place to go to. Every Friday, I'd look forward to going to the video store, whether it was Family Video or Blockbuster, to get my favorite movies to watch over the weekend when I wasn't in school. But 2 things ended up basically starting their death march. First was failing to purchase Netflix. They tried, they just weren't able to do it. And the second was the explosion of streaming options in the 2010s, including Netflix's explosion up to the top. And listen, I like DVDs and Blu-rays. I have my own collection, but it's retro at this point. It's not something that people want to do, and it's not easy compared to going on a streaming service where you don't have to leave your house. The company's corporate-owned stores all closed in 2014, and now video stores are pretty much the way of the dodo. The last Blockbuster is still around up in Bend, Oregon, but it's basically a family business at this point. Now, the last one to look at is Pontiac, which was a manufacturer in NASCAR, racing all the way up until 2004 and being most known for the Craven Busch finish, but it also sponsored races like the Spring Richmond race from 1988 to 2003 with the Pontiac Excitement 400. This was a car brand that was almost 97 years lasting, from 1926 to 2010. And it was part of NASCAR throughout pretty much all of its history up until it was out of the sport, and was one of the most popular car brands in America. But in the 2000s, the brand had massive changes, especially after leaving both NASCAR and the discontinuation of Oldsmobile, which caused new models to be made that weren't as popular, causing lower sales. And in 2010, GM would discontinue Pontiac, along with Hummer and Saturn. And there you have it. Those are 7 sponsors that used to be in NASCAR that just don't exist anymore, or at least not the same way they used to. Now I want to hear from you and see which ones you know of. What are ones that I failed to mention? Let me know down in the comments below. And while you're at it, leave a like on this video, share this video, and subscribe to this channel for more great NASCAR content. Thank you so much to all my channel members for your continued support. And until next time, have a good one.